This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome to this month's Rising Stars webinar, January 2021, the first of the year. If this is your first time, I'll give you a bit of information about who I am and what Rising Stars is all about. So my name's Dan Hawes. I'm the co-founder of GRB, or Graduate Recruitment Bureau. We're the go-to platform for high caliber university students, graduates and recruiters. We were established in 1997 by two graduates. We've grown to have over 40 staff and we have over 1,800 clients, covering all sectors, companies, large and small, some you will have heard of, such as the Post Office, IBM, Unilever and Ocado, to name but a few, but several other fast-growing SMEs, all dotted around the UK, all looking for high caliber university graduates. So our recruitment experts have successfully matched over 8,000 graduates with full-time graduate level jobs. And we're very busy at the moment working with a variety of different companies, all trying to drive their business forward in very, very challenging times. And who better than some exceptional graduates with fresh thinking, drive and ambition to help them reach their objectives. Now, at Rising Stars, this is a unique opportunity designed just for graduate employers. This enables you to see a shop window, if you will, of GRB's pick of the UK's finest graduating talent. So every month, our team of experts will carefully screen and select who they think are exceptional standout university students, essentially the best in class graduating students for 2021 in the UK. We then showcase a shortlist of approximately 50 of these rising stars on our website, grb.uk.com, enabling you to view their profiles and request a CV. Now, access to view these 50 rising stars is entirely free. In addition, every month we host a very short webinar where we interview a small selection of rising stars, discuss more about what they're looking for from an employer when they start their career. So hopefully, as a graduate employer, you'll be very interested to find out a little bit more from our rising stars today about what they're looking for in an employer. So today I'm delighted to welcome three of our rising stars on our panel. I'll get each of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get stuck into finding out a little bit more about what they're looking for from their first employer. So perhaps we could start with Henry.
Hi there, my name is Henry Fanti. I'm a final year student studying biology and chemistry under the Natural Sciences programme here at Durham. I'm really enjoying my degree and it's obviously particularly relevant at the moment. And I'm looking to start a career at some point in 2021. I've been applying for jobs since September. Still on the hunt. Outside my degree, in my free time, I enjoy playing all manner of sports: football, rugby, lots of different things, and collecting and listening to music. Thank you, guys.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Henry. Pablo.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, I'm Pablo Canacachafa, and I'm doing economics at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge. I'm really interested in consultancy, in particular economic consultancy, so kind of using the skills and ways of thinking that I've learned in my degree in my future career. Outside of my studies, I play piano and I'm very interested in music, and I'm also a keen climber. Yes, that's all about me. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Pablo. And Stephanie.
Thanks, Dan. My name's Stephanie and I'm in my final year of an MN with Materials Science at the University of Oxford. My master's project is specialising in biomaterials, which is a really fascinating field. Outside of my studies, I also engage a lot with different student societies. So I was president of the Materials Society. I've also been Women's Rowing Captain, and I've done multiple other things like that. I'm also interested in consultancy, specifically strategy consulting. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for your introductions there. We'll start with Henry. So you're doing a biology and chemistry undergraduate degree, and as you say, certainly could be very, very useful, the skill set that you're acquiring there for employers. Will you be looking to use your degree, or what are the criteria are you looking for when you start your first job?
Well, I'm not looking to head straight into science at the minute, you know, lab work, that sort of thing. I'm more looking to use the soft skills that I've acquired from my degree, you know, the analytical thinking, that sort of thing, that Pablo mentioned earlier, for example. And I have also been looking into consulting like the other two rising stars here. But in terms of what I'm looking for, there are loads of different things, as you said, lots of different facets that you want as a first job. I think one really important one for me is exposure and kind of rotation. So obviously you need to know what area of job you want to go into, but then within that, there's obviously lots and lots of variety. And so I think graduate schemes that really appeal to me are the ones where you spend X amount of months in different departments of, say, a huge company, or it could even be a small one, but just different little bits of it. And I feel like that will give you a better chance to get exposed to what the business does, and then also find what you really are passionate about within the world of you know, business and those careers. Because otherwise, I don't want to be stuck doing the same thing day in, day out, even if I don't like it. So variety is really important for me, and if a graduate scheme encourages that, that's really encouraging. And then also, just I think company culture is a bit of a cliche, I think, but I want there to be sort of quite an acknowledgement that, you know, you've got to work really hard, but then also you can relax a bit, and maybe things like work-life balance appeal to me. So there was one company that I've applied to that you know, will it work you hard during the week, but then promise that you'll be home by 6 on a Friday. That sort of idea also think it's really important, because I'm ready to work hard in a grad scheme. I appreciate that, but I think a little bit of consideration for things like that are really important as well. And yeah, another one is impact. Just some companies are really huge and obviously have lots of different positions, but if I could make an impact on what they're doing, and if they're a truly global company with a huge impact, then that will make my role at the company feel even more special and more give me a bit more drive to really work hard and crack on. So, you know, all sorts of different projects that different companies run at the moment can be really influential and really make a change on the world we live in at the moment. And that's obviously a huge draw, and makes a career probably very fulfilling at the same time. Yeah, those would probably be my main three.
That's good. Some strong preferences there, Henry, particularly you know, exposure to the business. I mean, that might be more easy in a smaller firm, let's say, but with a bigger firm, if it's part of a program, you may inherently have rotational placements, and that at the end it'll help you assess where your strengths are, I guess. But so, a lot of interesting characteristics there. And you said you've been applying since September, so do you have a short list of companies that meet your criteria so far?
Well, yeah, I do. I've got quite an extensive list that I've applied for, and we're still going, still looking, and it's quite interesting, because the further you delve into it, I think you find out the more kind of career events and things that companies hold, the more you really hear about them, and that's when I'm a bit more encouraged to really give the application a strong go. Because if it's just fill in the form and then an email comes back saying thank you, we'll let you know in a few months, it's not quite as good as you submit the form and then you actually speak to people who work at the company and you have calls with them and things like that. I guess it's networking, but I find those a bit more enticing, I'll say, when you get a real insight into what the company's like and what you'll be doing in just a little bit more detail, basically, than just the application on the internet. So that's one of the things that's picked out companies for me, really.
Good. For graduates, there's lots of ways of researching companies. You know, websites obviously a good starting point. Unfortunately, career fairs haven't happened last season, where you'd normally have an opportunity maybe to speak to a graduate who's been through the program face to face. I mean, that used to be a key way for employers to meet potential hires on campus. Some have switched this in a virtual environment and it kind of hasn't been impacted, but for a lot of graduates who aren't on campus, for instance, it has meant that they've had to sort of look for other sources of information. So, when it comes to choosing your eventual employer, I mean, what would be a key influencer to your decision, Henry?
In terms of when you apply and how you react to that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, the sort of the final thing that makes you think, yeah, I really want to work for this employer. Is it maybe something that the CEOs put out on their social media, or would it be something you've heard from through your alumni society? It might be a combination of these, but is there one thing that would make you, sign on the dotted line, so to speak?
I'd probably, one of the things you said is just talking to, so I've made a couple of calls to people who graduated from my the year above me at university, who I know and have ended up at X different firms, and it's just talking to them. And I think if you get a chat with someone who's working there, and it's not, and they make it clear that it's not all like sunshine and rainbows. I don't think any job is absolutely perfect, but if someone gives me an honest opinion, tells me how it is straight, what they day to day, yes, I might stay in the office late, but then also, next week it might be all, that sort of just honest opinion about what it's like. Because then, you don't expect to do a grad scheme and not have to work hard. That's part of the package. It's when someone just gives me a straight up opinion of what it's going to be like. And I think sometimes at these things like careers fairs, it can be glossed over, not ignored or lied about or anything like that, just slightly glossed over because you want to focus on, you get these benefits, you get this and that, but then just the honest opinion. So when I'm signing that dotted line, I know what I'm in for, and like a good detailed overview of what the program is going to look like, or what the plan that the company has for me is with that first role. So I would say that speaking to someone that works there or has worked there for a year or two, whatever, is really, really helpful and is convincing.
Sure. So a final reality check, if you like,
yeah,
of that employer. That makes perfect sense. Henry, thank you very much. In a very short space of time, you've really kind of illustrated in plenty of detail some of the criteria for selecting the employer. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to Pablo now, who expressed an interest in consultancy, but specifically economic consultancy. So presumably you're looking to use your degree first and foremost.
Yeah, I think I've really enjoyed my studies, and I think the idea that I could not kind of leave that behind, but actually, develop on that and use those skills in quite like a specialized role, I think is something that really interests me. And yeah, I think that kind of the economics aspect of consultancy is definitely something that I'm interested in pursuing and yeah, trying out. And that's not to say that I'm solely focusing on economic consulting. I think especially given the current, climate economically and with the pandemic and everything, I think it's important to always, keep an open mind and keep a wide variety of different careers and options. So for example, I've applied for, things like the civil service fast stream, as well as other economic regulators, and kind of, a really wide range of different employers to make sure that I keep my options open and, make the most informed decision later down the line.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to keep an open mind, because I mean, the kind of firms that I imagine you'd want to work for would be based in London. Now, what with people being forced to work from home, and many employers being forced to adopt that, we're reading that when we come out of this, a huge number of employers will continue to offer this, if not full-time, maybe on a hybrid version. So this opens up, opportunities, especially for graduates who might live in Manchester and don't particularly want to live in London and all the expense and hassle that goes with it. So geographically, certainly, the opportunities are far more, and not just in this country, but abroad as well, overseas. How would you feel about working from home though? Because that, when you started your degree, maybe that wasn't such a priority. Has it gone further up the list for you, Pablo?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I can speak from experience here, as I did an online internship last summer, where, I mean, I live in Brighton, and I worked for the Financial Conduct Authority, which is based in London. And I'll be honest, if anything, that kind of opened my eyes to just how important working in the office actually is for me. I think working from home is definitely a really useful tool, and it means that when needs must, you can be flexible and you have that option. But I think I did 8 weeks from home, and I think it really made me realise that being in the office and making those in-person connections with your team, and especially the fellow interns who are the same age as me, I think missing out on those key kind of interactions was a great loss. And so I think, yeah, later down the line, when the opportunity to work in the office does come up, I think definitely for me personally, an advantage for some firms over others would be, yeah, the opportunity to work in the office more than working from home. But that I know people's preferences will vary, but just from my experience working from home over the summer, I think working in the office is a really important part of any graduate scheme, really.
Yeah, we're hearing that from a lot of graduates who are starting their careers this year, that for many of them, it's their social circle as well. They're fresh out of uni and they want to make new connections, and work is probably the most the best environment to make that happen. But then also from a career point of view, it's important being in the office or among other colleagues, so you can develop soft skills and also your own kind of social capital within that firm, and being seen, which can be problematic if you're working from home. I mean, many companies are working through this with technology and video platforms and things like that. But it'd be interesting to see how productivity is affected for graduates who are just starting out. For certain jobs, it may actually improve productivity, but for other jobs, it may not. So this is very much a turning point at the moment. It's just very interesting to see whether graduates are up for this, particularly because they're having to study remotely from university. But we're expecting quite a sort of almost a lot of mental health issues coming out of this, I think, and employers need to be one step ahead of that, I think, for this year's cohort. Finally, Pablo, would you have any kind of red flags with an employer that would really turn you off, for instance?
I mean, not red flags in particular, but there were definitely things that I desire over things that I don't really value as much. So, for example, I think Henry made some great points in that I think variety is really important. I think it's difficult enough to choose a career or sector in the first place without having to then specialize within that. I think as much variety as possible, I think is really important. So, for example, yeah, a graduate scheme that doesn't offer very much variety would definitely be, I think, close to a red flag. And then I think another really important factor for me would be opportunity to grow within the company. I think when I think about a graduate employer and I think about where I want to work, I am asking myself those kinds of questions like, where do I see myself in 5 years with this company? Where do I see myself in 10 years? Do I see myself, progressing, getting promoted, maybe in a different department, different country, developing my career? Or does this graduate scheme seem like it would keep me in the same place and at the same level for a long amount of time? So I think, yeah, so graduate employers that don't really emphasize things like, the opportunity to grow, variety, and one more factor I think would be personalization, which I don't think is talked about very much. I think a lot of especially like Henry was saying, when you fill in the form online, unless you've spoken to someone, it can feel a little bit monotonous. Everything feels the same. When you fill in the form, often it's hard to find what sets out one employer from the other. So if I ever find a graduate scheme that has something a little bit different, maybe it talks about an extra feature or an extra element or aspect of it that, for example, other employers in that same industry don't have, I think that's a really positive thing, and it really kind of sets it out from the other employers. So I think those would be the three main, I think, important things that I look for in that regard. Yeah,
thank you, Pablo. That's a really strong message to employers watching this, to understand that to unleash the potential of exceptional graduates, you need to give them room to grow and have a very clear career path. Most employers appreciate that, and they see graduates as a commitment to the future, as part of their succession plan. So organisations really need to back that up with actionable and achievable career goals. So that's a really good point to raise. Thank you very much, Pablo. So Stephanie, University of Oxford, material science, specialising in biomaterials. That sounds really, really interesting and going to be super useful for a variety of employers, I imagine. And we've heard our other rising stars talk about kind of transferable skills as well. So I'm sure you're going to have a very, very useful skill set for a variety of employers. Where do you want to put your skill set? What are you looking for in an employer that's going to help you realise your potential?
So I think first and foremost, what I'm looking for in an employer for me realising my potential, it's been touched upon a bit by Pablo and Henry before, but it's the ability for me to keep learning while I'm on the job. I love learning. It's something that I've been passionate about my whole life, and it's something that I want to keep being passionate about. And I think it's really important for me that when I'm in a company and working for them, I'm also being able to keep reskilling myself, learning more skills, being involved in lots of different things so that I can keep at the forefront of being able to work well. And I think it's also really important for companies to, as you mentioned earlier, invest in graduates and make sure that they're constantly reskilling them so that they're able to keep delivering new and good things, especially as the job market and the world market is changing so fast. You can't expect something that you've taught as a skill 2 years ago to still be sort of at the forefront 2 years later because everything's changing. And so I think it's really important that there's sort of training within the workforce and also mentorship as well and personal development, which has been touched upon before. So those are skills that I am really looking for. Also at the start of my career, something that I'm particularly keeping an eye out for is jobs which would teach me skills for life that I think would be helpful for my career forever. So for example, one of the main jobs that I've applied for, which I'm in the final stages of now, is a company where they've given me 14 weeks intensive training right at the start in coding. So then I'd learn that skill and I'd learn it with applications to data analysis. And that's a skill that I would have for life, which I would have been taught at the start of this scheme. And that's something that's really put that scheme ahead of many others in my mind, because I know that even if I wouldn't stay at that company for the next 10 years, I know that the skills I would gain from that would last me for life, and are really fundamental and good skills. That's one of the key things I look for. And one of the other things that I look for really sort of carefully with employers is that they align with my personal view of the world as well. So I want to make sure that, for example, I'm extremely passionate about the climate crisis, and I want to make sure that the company I'm involved with represents what I want to be doing, representing sort of myself as. So I want to make sure that they know their impact on the planet, they're trying to reduce it in ways that they can, and also that they allow me to sort of work there and attempt to minimise my sort of impact on the planet as well. So one of the big things, I was applying for lots of internships last summer, and one of the big things that I did is every interview I was at, I'd always sort of at the end when they have any questions, I'd be like, is there any way that you'd allow me to tailor my workload so that I wouldn't be flying internationally, for example, and that would there be a scope for me to do that within this role? And therefore, and if they had that scope, then it would make me so much happier, because personally I'm trying not to fly at all. And so I don't want to commit myself to a career where I'd be having to fly every week. And lots of things like that, and also diversity as well. I make sure that I always look at the website first, and I look at the sort of our employees and who works for us, and have a look at that, and also external awards which they've been awarded for their workplace. So, for example, the company that I've got an internship at this summer, they've been in the top 10 places to work in the UK for the last for 10 out of the last 13 years. And they've won awards for race, they've won awards for inclusivity, they've won awards for their commitment to giving back to the planet, and also for their gender equality within the company. And that's something that I think is really important, because I want to align myself with a company who's doing that, and I want to produce benefits for a company which I approve of how they're sort of acting. And I think that's, so also certified B Corps, I look for that as well. But that sort of thing.
Brilliant. That's really interesting, Stephanie. You've brought up a few interesting new criteria there. If we talk about, working for an industry, let's say, that is aligned to your values, this can be very challenging for certain organizations, say for instance in the oil industry, the clothing industry, aerospace, things that have a direct effect on the climate, let's say. So they have a real challenge to change perceptions, and they do struggle to find graduates for that reason. Where on the flip side, there are other companies that are flying high, they can't do any wrong, and they are attracting a lot of people. So it's interesting that how companies are marketing themselves to graduates along the lines of certain environmental or social purposes, I guess. So that would be attractive to you, Stephanie, which is very, very interesting and very encouraging. You've also talked about, I guess, continually learning. I mean, all three of you will now have developed a habit for continual learning, and it's very important that employers are able to tap into that and keep you moving forward. And it's very much not just a job. It has to be something that you feel is worthwhile, is satisfying, and helping you move forward. So that's very useful to hear about. I'm also interested to learn what other influences have shaped your opinion, Stephanie, because you've had internships beforehand, which presumably played a key role in making you think, yeah, I like this kind of company, or maybe not that industry. Would you say that's being quite prevalent in your thought process?
So the internships I applied for and received last summer were actually postponed to this summer because of the pandemic, and they postponed them early on in March because they were like, we don't know if we can commit to this, but what we can commit to is moving it next year and giving you that experience next year. So I haven't actually done an internship within consultancy yet, but I did an internship sort of for a very small engineering-based company, which was fascinating and I did really enjoy. But I also know that I think my talents, first and foremost, while I do love science, love engaging with it, and I think the research is really incredible, lots of engineering stuff is fantastic, and I find it so fascinating. I don't think that I am the best person to be doing the on the ground work. I think lots of the stuff that my talents are sort of good in is with leadership and communication more, and sort of learning lots about quite a few things rather than sort of everything about one tiny aspect of the world. And so I want to be able to apply myself to lots of different areas and learn about lots of different things. I don't want to just commit to learning about one thing forever, which I think was what one of my internships I did in summer of first year. It was just a small engineering company, and while it was really interesting and fascinating, I got to a point where I was like, I think this is really cool and I love the projects that I'm doing, but I also know that I don't want to be just looking at this forever, and I want to know that I can move on to another project, or I can be assigned to another project when this one's wrapped up. I don't want to just be doing the same thing, which is one of the big draws for me of consulting and consultancy, is that often you will be moved between projects after a certain amount of time, and that you'll get to work on lots of different things in different areas, and you'll be able to constantly be learning about lots of different areas rather than just constantly learning about one thing over and over, which is something that I would say has interested me, and especially doing my master's this year as well, that sort of reaffirms that for me. While I'm really enjoying it, I will say I think research is not the place where my skills are the most suited, and I think therefore it's important to recognise that. And it doesn't mean that sort of my master's is useless, because I've learned so much doing it, and it's still really interesting, and it would have taught me a lot of skills. But I think one of the most important things that it's taught me is that I fundamentally don't want to be doing sort of research into one area for the rest of my life, and I want to learn and experience and do lots of different things, which is probably that. But I'm hoping after doing my internship this summer in consultancy, I'll check that I do have an affinity for that field. I was hoping to have been able to do that last summer and then apply for graduate roles, having known whether it was the sort of job industry that I definitely wanted to be in for a while or not. But obviously with the pandemic, that changes everything a bit.
Now that's really interesting, and it sounds like in your case that those internships helped you sort of understand yourself a bit more about where your skills lie, which is very interesting. And I mean, all of you from 3 or 4 years at university with your extracurricular and work experience, you're all going to have a very good understanding of what your skill set is and how you can best apply it and it's quite evident from what you've shared today that you are very, very focused. You know what you want, and I wish you all the best luck in securing work this year. Obviously, we'll do our best to match you up with some of our clients, and we will be putting your profile on our website here for employers to have an overview of our rising stars. There are 50 on there at the moment. They won't be on there very long. I imagine they will have plenty of choice from different employers around the UK. So thank you all very much for your precious time today. Wish you all the best in your studies. You get the grades that you deserve, and ultimately that first step you take into the world of work is the best possible one for you. So thank you all very, very much. And for anyone tuning in, we'll be having another webinar next month with 3 other final year students, all sharing what they're looking for from employers. Thank you.